Okay, so are you ready to hear about a real-life kingdom? It's a total roller coaster ride, way more dramatic than any you've seen on TV.
I'm in. Let's hear it.
Okay, so we're diving into Nepal's monarchy. It's a listener request,
Oh,
actually.
wow.
They want to know, like, how did this kingdom rise? Why did it fall? And what's with this recent comeback they're staging? It's wild.
Yeah, there's been a lot of buzz about that.
So yeah, to help us get through this deep dive, we've got a really fascinating podcast episode that goes through like the whole history of the Nepalese monarch.
Sounds like a great place to start.
Yeah. It's full of these crazy twists and turns. Like, get this, there's this king, right? He unites this like fractured land, and then bam, a royal massacre that like shocked the whole
Oh,
world.
yeah, I remember hearing about that.
And now, like, just recently, there was this huge rally with like thousands of people. They're all like, we want the king back.
Yeah, it's a fascinating case study on how power dynamics can shift, over time.
For real. And what I think is really interesting about Nepal is that it's not just like kings and queens, you know? It's about all these bigger things that like shape a whole nation.
Absolutely. You've got conquest and political intrigue and, of course, tragedy.
Mm,
It's all there.
totally. And it feels like they're still writing the final chapter, you know?
It does, doesn't it?
But anyway, let's start at the beginning, way back in the 18th century, with this guy named Prithvi Narayan Shah. He's basically like a legend in Nepal.
Mhm.
Like they call him the father of Nepal.
Yeah, he's a huge figure in their history.
And he wasn't just some, power-hungry dude who wanted to conquer everything. From what I've read, he was more than that.
Oh, you're definitely right. He had a much bigger vision for Nepal.
So back then, Nepal wasn't the unified country we know today, right?
No, not at all. It was actually a bunch of like small independent kingdoms
Hmm.
all kind of fighting each other for power. Constant rivalry.
So it was like a Game of Thrones situation.
Wow, exactly. And Prithvi Narayan Shah, he started in this small kingdom called Gorkha in 1743, and he just saw the potential for strong, unified Nepal.
So he was like, we got to bring all these little kingdoms together and be one big, powerful nation.
Exactly. And he wasn't just talking about it. He actually wrote down a plan for how to do it. It's called the Dibya Upadesh.
Okay, a doctrine, huh? So it wasn't just about, like, military strategy.
No, it was much more than that. He talked about economic independence,
Huh.
like don't rely on these foreign powers, which was pretty radical thinking back then.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Oh, get this. He even warned future rulers to be wary of the British East India Company, which was like just starting to become really powerful in the region.
Talk about having foresight. He saw it coming.
He did, didn't he?
So he was way ahead of his time, but, like, how did he actually bring all those different kingdoms together?
Well, it definitely wasn't easy. I mean, it took decades of, strategic warfare and forging alliances. It was a long process.
Yeah, I bet. But wasn't there a really clever tactic he used against the Malala kings?
You're thinking of the Kathmandu Valley, right?
Yes. Those guys were powerful, weren't they?
They were the dominant force in the valley. So instead of a direct assault, Prithvi Narayan Shah decided to use a blockade.
What? A
Yeah.
blockade. That's pretty smart.
Yeah, he basically cut off all their trade routes. They were completely isolated, no supplies in or out. It put immense pressure on the Mallas to surrender.
So it was like a slow squeeze.
Exactly. A strategic squeeze, you could say.
So that's how he finally took Kathmandu in 1769.
That's right. And that was essentially the birth of modern Nepal.
Wow, what a story. So Prithvi Narayan Shah, he wasn't just about expanding his territory. He actually believed a unified Nepal would be stronger.
Absolutely. He believed they would be better equipped to resist outside threats. Sadly, his successors faced some pretty serious challenges.
All right. The British Empire.
Yeah, they eventually entered the picture, and I know you're fascinated by the Gurkha soldiers, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've always wanted to know more about them. Did they come about around this time?
They did. After Prithvi Narayan Shah died, his successors, well, they kind of struggled to maintain that unity he worked so hard to create. There were internal power struggles, family drama, that sort of thing.
Oh, so like the typical palace intrigue?
Pretty much. And as Prithvi Narayan Shah predicted, the British East India Company was becoming more and more aggressive.
Yeah, they were hungry for more territory.
Oh, absolutely. And this all led to the Anglo-Nepalese War from 1814 to 1816.
And that's where the Gurkha soldiers really showed what they were made of.
That's exactly right. Even though Nepal ended up losing the war and had to give up some territory in the Sugali
Yeah,
tribe.
that's a bummer.
Yeah. But the British were so impressed by the Gurkha soldiers. They were just, so brave. Their fighting skills were incredible.
They were like, we need these guys on our side.
Yeah. So the British started recruiting Gurkhas into their own army. And that tradition actually continues to this day.
That's so wild to think about. Like, this historical event still has ripples today. It's amazing. But losing to the British must have weakened the monarchy.
It definitely had a destabilizing effect. The Shah kings who came after Prithvi Narayan Shah, they just weren't as strong or unified. And that's when things take a really dramatic turn.
Oh no, what happened?
Well, a new power player emerged. The Rana dynasty.
The Ranas, okay. I've heard of them, but I don't really know the whole story. How did they manage to, like, outmaneuver the Shah king?
Well, it all starts with this crazy event called the Kot Massacre in 1846. Basically, this ambitious nobleman, Jung Bahadur Rana, he just seizes control.
Wow, so it was a straight-up power grab.
Oh, yeah. Brutal and swift. And he establishes the Rana dynasty. They're pretty clever. They basically sidelined the Shah kings, made them figureheads.
So, like, the kings were still there, but they didn't really have any power.
Exactly. The Ranas were the ones calling the shots. They became hereditary prime ministers, so they had, a lock on power. And they ruled for over 100 years.
Wow, a whole century of shadow rulers. So what was their rule like?
Well, they kept a tight grip on things. They weren't big on, modernization or development. They were mostly focused on keeping themselves in power.
They sound kind of like dictators.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah.
And they close off the country from the outside world. So by the time the 20th century rolls around, they're getting pretty unpopular.
Yeah, I can see how that would happen. So how did they finally lose their grip on power?
Well, democratic ideas were spreading around the world.
Right.
And those ideas started to reach Nepal.
Right. People wanted more freedom, more say in how their country was run.
Exactly. And the Shah kings saw an opportunity to, reclaim their lost power.
Hmm.
The king at the time, King Tribhuvan, he decided to get involved.
Wait, so the monarchy, after being pushed aside for so long, they staged a comeback.
You got it.
Yeah.
King Tribhuvan secretly worked with these pro-democracy activists. They supported the revolution in 1951, which finally overthrew the Rana dynasty.
So it was the end of an era.
Definitely a turning point in Nepal's history.
You'd think this would be a happy ending, right? The monarchy back in power, democracy on the rise.
You would think so, wouldn't you? But there's a twist.
Another one.
Yeah, this story is full of them. So King Tribhuvan's son, King Mahendra, he had his own ideas about how Nepal should be run.
Okay.
And
He didn't like democracy very much.
what? You're kidding?
Nope. Just 9 years after helping to restore the monarchy, he dissolved the democratic system. It was 1960. And he implemented this new system called the panchayat system.
Wait, hold on. So they went from being sidelined by the Ranas to basically becoming the absolute power again.
Yeah, it was pretty ironic.
So what was this panchayat system all about?
Basically, it was a partyless system. Like,
Right.
no political parties allowed. It was this hierarchical structure. And guess who was at the top?
A king.
Vingo. He had all the authority.
So
Yeah.
not exactly a democracy.
So how did the people feel about this? Were they okay with it?
Well, there was resistance, for sure. But the panchayat system actually lasted for 30 years. It was a period of progress in some ways, but also, lots of repression.
Wow, 3 decades. That's a long time. So what happened next?
Well, it wasn't until 1990 that things really changed.
Okay, what happened in 1990?
Another pro-democracy movement, a big one, called the 1990 People's Movement.
The people were like, enough is enough.
Yeah, they were demanding change, demanding their rights. And this time, they were successful. The panchayat system was finally dismantled.
So finally, after decades of back and forth, Nepal establishes a constitutional monarchy.
Right. The king's power was finally limited. Now they have a system more like England's,
So this has got to be the moment where things settle down, right?
You'd hope so, wouldn't you? But remember I said this story had some tragic twists.
Oh, no, don't tell me.
Yeah, it takes a dark turn. And it leads us to one of the most shocking events in Nepal's modern history.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What happened?
The Royal Massacre of 2001.
Okay, we got to unpack this. What exactly happened?
It was June 1st, 2001, at the Narayan Shah Royal Palace.
Mm-hmm.
And the Crown Prince Dipendra, well, he allegedly opened fire on his own family.
No way! He shot his family.
Yeah, he killed his father, King Birendra, his mother, Queen Aishwarya, and several other members of the royal family.
That is horrific. What would drive someone to do something like that?
That's the million-dollar question. Officially, it was blamed on, a drunken rage. But to this day, a lot of people believe there's more to the story.
So like a conspiracy.
Exactly. There were rumors about political motives, maybe even foreign involvement. The official investigation was really quick, and a lot of people weren't satisfied with the answers.
Yeah, that sounds suspicious. So no clear answers, huh? That must have been so traumatic for the country.
It really was. This whole event shook the nation to its core. It created this sense of uncertainty and vulnerability that the monarchy just never fully recovered from.
So with the king and queen gone, who took the throne?
Well, King Birendra's brother, Gyanendra, he became the new king.
Hmm.
But unlike his predecessors, he wasn't very popular.
Yeah, I can imagine taking over after something like that. Tough situation. So what happened? Did he try to, like, stabilize things?
He tried, but he wasn't exactly beloved by the people. And in 2005, he made a move that really backfired.
What did he do?
Well, remember the Mausan insurgency we talked about? It was causing a lot of instability. And Gyanendra used that as an excuse to dismiss parliament. He basically took control of the government.
Oh, wow. So he staged a royal coup.
You could say that. He claimed it was necessary to restore order, but many people saw it as a power grab, like he was trying to roll back democracy.
So how did the people react to that?
They hit the streets. There were massive protests, huge crowds demanding the restoration of parliament. It was called the 2006 People's Movement.
Okay, so they weren't just going to sit back and let him take over.
Not a chance. They stood up for their rights.
So what happened? Did Gyanendra back down?
He did, eventually. But by that point, it was too late. The monarchy had lost a lot of its legitimacy. And just 2 years later, in 2008, Nepal officially abolished the monarchy.
Wow. So Gyanendra was the last king of Nepal.
That's right.
What a roller coaster ride. Unification, absolute power, sidelined, then back in control, and finally abolished. It's hard to believe all that happened in, like, just a couple hundred years.
I know, right? It's a great example of how history is rarely straightforward.
Yeah, and just when you think the story is over.
There's another twist.
I knew it!
Yeah.
So tell me, what's this about a resurgence in support for the monarchy?
Well, despite everything that's happened, in recent years, there's been this, surprising comeback of pro-monarchy feelings in Nepal.
Wait, seriously, after all that, why?
It's a mix of things, really. There's this, disillusionment with the current political system.
Yeah, politics can be messy.
It can, and Nepal's been struggling with instability and corruption since the monarchy was abolished.
So some people are like, things were better with a king.
You could say that. There's a kind of nostalgia for a simpler time.
But it's more than just nostalgia, right?
Right. There's also this sense that the monarchy represents unity in a country that's incredibly diverse. Nepal has so many different ethnicities and languages, and some people see the monarchy as a symbol that brings everyone together.
Okay, I'm starting to see why this is such a complicated issue. But is there really a chance the monarchy could come back? I mean, Nepal's a democracy now, right?
It's definitely a big question. Reinstating the monarchy would mean some major changes to the constitution.
Yeah, that's not easy.
But to really understand the chances of a comeback, we need to talk about Gyanendra and what happened on March 9th, 2025.
Okay, hold that thought. We're going to dive into all that right after the break. All right, so we're back. And, before the break, we were talking about how Gyanendra might be involved in this whole monarchy comeback thing.
Yeah, he's been pretty quiet since the monarchy was abolished,
Yeah,
right?
that low profile.
But in the last few years, he's been making more and more public appearances.
Like what kind of appearances?
Oh, visiting temples, going to cultural events, that kind of thing.
It's like he's testing the water, seeing how people react.
Exactly. Gauging the public mood.
Okay, but what about March 9th? You mentioned something specific happened that day.
Oh, yeah, that was a big day.
What happened?
So Gyanendra was returning to Kathmandu from a trip to India.
Okay.
And get this, thousands of people showed up at the airport to welcome him back.
Thousands. Wow.
Yeah, it was huge. They were chanting pro-monarchy slogans, waving flags, the whole 9 yards.
That's a pretty clear message.
Oh, yeah, you couldn't miss it.
So it wasn't just a few people feeling nostalgic. This was a serious show of support.
For sure.
What was the overall vibe? Were people, directly calling for the monarchy to be restored?
It's hard to say for sure if that was their specific demand, but the symbolism was pretty powerful, you know?
The sheer number of people, that's got to mean something.
Exactly. It showed that a good chunk of the population, they still have a lot of respect for the monarchy.
So we've got this massive rally. We've got Gyanendra stepping back into the spotlight. How are the current political leaders reacting to all this?
Well, for the most part, they're downplaying it.
Really?
Yeah, they're calling it a wave of nostalgia, saying it's not going to have any real impact.
But can they really ignore it? It's not just a handful of people, it's thousands.
Yeah, I think it would be a mistake to just brush it aside.
I mean, there's got to be something fueling this pro-monarchy sentiment, right?
There is. There's a lot of frustration with the current political system.
Hmm.
You know, the instability, the corruption, the constant fighting between parties.
So people are looking to the monarchy as a potential solution.
Maybe. I think it's more about a longing for stability, for a strong leader who can unite the country.
Makes sense, but even if people want that, how realistic is it to bring back the monarchy? I mean, Nepal's a democracy now, right? Changing that would require rewriting the constitution.
Oh, it would definitely be a challenge, a lot of hurdles to overcome.
But it's not impossible.
Well, constitutions can be amended if there's enough political will.
So what are the chances of that happening? Did the podcast episode mention anything about that?
It didn't make any specific predictions, but it did point out some interesting things about Gyanendra.
Like what?
Well, he hasn't, directly said he wants to be king again.
Yeah.
But his actions are speaking louder than words. He's been making these public appearances, saying things that appeal to royalists.
It's like he's laying the groundwork.
Exactly. He's not making demands, but he's definitely positioning himself as a potential leader if the opportunity arises.
Man, this is getting more and more interesting. What do you think this all means for Nepal's future?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? The country's at a crossroads.
Yeah, between the monarchy and democracy.
Right. Nepal's a young democracy, and it's facing some serious challenges, not just political, but economic, too.
So what should we be watching for to see where things are headed?
Well, Gyanendra's moves are definitely important. Will he become more vocal? Will he start actively campaigning for a return to the monarchy? Or will he just keep playing this subtle game?
Right, so we need to pay attention to what he says and does.
Absolutely. And we also need to watch how much public support there is for the monarchy.
Like, will those big rallies continue?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Will this pro-monarchy sentiment grow? Will it become more organized? Or will it fade away as people realize it's not a magic solution?
And the third thing.
Oh, that's how the current government responds to all of this.
Right, they can't just ignore it.
No, they need to take it seriously. Will they try to address the concerns that are driving people towards the monarchy, the corruption, the instability? Or will they just dismiss it as a fringe movement and risk alienating a big chunk of the population?
So it's like a three-way tug of war.
Exactly. The former king, the people, and the current government, they're all pulling in different directions.
It's going to be fascinating to see who wins.
It is. This whole situation really highlights how, history is never really over.
Yeah, the past always has a way of coming back to haunt us.
Right. And the choices that people make today, they're going to shape Nepal's future.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've talked about the history, the drama, the current situation. But before we wrap up, I think we need to dive into the actual arguments for and against restoring the monarchy.
Yeah, let's get into the nitty-gritty.
I'm sure our listener is wondering, what are the pros and cons? What are people saying on both sides of this debate?
All right, let's do it. In part 3, we'll unpack the reasons why some Nepalists believe bringing back the monarchy is the best way forward, and why others are totally against it.
Okay, so we're back and ready to tackle the big question, right? Is bringing back the monarchy actually a good idea for Nepal?
It's the debate that's gripping the whole nation right now, and there are some really strong arguments on both sides.
So let's dive into those arguments. What are the main points people are making in favor of bringing back the monarchy?
Well, one of the biggest ones you hear over and over is stability.
Stability, okay. Like how so?
Well, they look at the current political scene, and it's been pretty chaotic since the monarchy was abolished in 2008.
Yeah, we've talked about all the instability and corruption.
Exactly. And they argue that the monarchy could bring back a sense of continuity, like a grounding force that rises above all the political bickering.
Okay, I can see how that would appeal to people, especially those who have lived through those really turbulent times.
Right. It's like a longing for a simpler time when things felt more stable.
But is that really the role of a monarchy in like a modern society?
Well, that's where the debate gets really interesting.
How so?
The people who oppose the monarchy, they say it's inherently undemocratic to have this unelected institution with so much power.
Right. It's like you're born into power. You didn't earn it.
Exactly. And they believe that Nepal should be focusing on strengthening its democratic institutions, not going back to a system where one family holds all the cards.
Yeah, democracy can be messy, but it's about giving the power to the people, not to a king or queen just because of who their parents are.
Absolutely. It's about the will of the people, not the will of a royal family.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the argument that the monarchy could help unify a diverse country like Nepal?
That's a really interesting one. The pro-monarchy folks, they often talk about the king as this symbol of national unity, someone who can bring everyone together regardless of their ethnicity, language, or religion.
Right, they point to figures like King Birendra, who was like generally well respected by a lot of different communities.
Exactly. But the critics, they worry that focusing on the monarchy could actually make things worse for marginalized groups.
How so?
Well, if the king is this symbol of national unity, what about the people who don't feel represented by that symbol?
Right, it's like it's forcing a single identity on everyone.
And they argue that real unity comes from listening to everyone's concerns, not from, imposing this potentially outdated symbol on a really diverse population.
So it's about inclusivity, not just like a symbolic unity.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about stability, we've talked about unity. What about the economic arguments? Do people think that the monarchy would be good or bad for Nepal's economy?
Well, some of the pro-monarchy folks, they believe that the monarchy could actually attract more foreign investment in tourism.
Oh, interesting. Why do they think that?
Well, they point to the fact that Nepal was a pretty popular tourist destination when the kings were in power.
Ah, the whole land of the mysterious kingdom kind of vibe.
Yeah, exactly. And they also talk about the economic influence that the royal family used to have.
Yeah.
They were big landowners involved in a lot of different industries.
Right, they had a lot of wealth and power.
But of course, the critics are worried about that concentration of power.
Like it could lead to corruption.
Exactly. They're worried about favoritism, lack of transparency.
Like if you're connected to the royal family, you get all the best deals.
Right. And that creates an uneven playing field, which isn't good for anyone in the long run.
So it seems like there's some really valid points on both sides of this debate.
There are. It's not a simple issue, and there's a lot to consider.
It's not just about, like, being nostalgic for the past. It's about what kind of future the Nepali people want for their country.
Absolutely. It's a really important decision with huge implications.
So where do we go from here? What should our listener be watching for as this story continues to unfold?
Well, I think one of the most important things to pay attention to is how this debate is happening within Nepal itself.
Like, are people actually talking about it?
Exactly. Are they having, these thoughtful discussions, weighing the pros and cons? Are there public forums where different perspectives are being shared?
Yeah, are they really engaging with this issue?
Right. Because ultimately, this decision should be made by the Nepali people, not by, a few politicians or by outside forces.
So it's about listening to the voices of the people, understanding what they want for their future.
And it's also important to watch how the international community reacts to all of this.
Oh, that's interesting. Why?
Well, will Nepal's neighbors, will other countries respect their right to choose their own path, even if that means restoring the monarchy? Or will there be pressure from outside to, influence the outcome?
So it's about respecting Nepal's sovereignty, letting them decide their own destiny.
Exactly.
This has been such an amazing journey through Nepal's history, full of twists and turns and unexpected developments.
I know, right? It's been a wild ride.
We started this episode talking about a real-life kingdom more dramatic than anything on TV, and it seems like that drama is only going to continue.
It definitely feels like that.
Nepal's future is wide open, and it's going to be fascinating to see what path they choose.
I'm with you on that. I can't wait to see what happens next.
Well, that's all the time we have for today, but thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Nepal's monarchy. It's been a real pleasure exploring this topic with you.
The pleasure was all mine.
And to our listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this journey as much as we have. Remember to keep exploring, keep learning, and keep questioning the world around you until next time.